Ladies and metal fish, this is your hard-boiled king of draw style, Daddy Janjo, baby. So far we've covered the first core set and the first expansion set in the OCG, in addition to the first tournament, even if it was played via the Duel Monsters video game. Well, as time marches forward, so does the scope of the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is in many ways, as March 6, 1999 marks the last hurrah of the Bandai game. Yeah, that weird first iteration of Yu-Gi-Oh! I covered years ago pops its fiendish head up from the venomous swamp with the Toei Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie. I won't go into the movie itself, as I'll save that for another video if you're all interested, perhaps a sub-bonus. Keynote here is the movie featured two obtainable promotional cards for the now dead game in Blue Eyes White Dragon's 3-body connection and Wicked Chain. When combined, it allowed the White Dragon to attack up to 8 times. Whoa! This is not to say it was the only important factor from this event. On the same day the film premiered at the 1999 Toei Animation Fair, you could pick up the first ever Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG starter box. This was a package that contained everything you needed to jumpstart you playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It contained a deck with a deck box, a playmat, 50 score sheets, a calculator, a rule book, and even star chips like in the Duelist Kingdom arc in the manga. I've already gone over the basic rules in the Volume 1 video, so I won't go over the basics here, but there are some interesting rules to bring up. Firstly is the ante rule. Yeah, betting was legal early on, assuming both players agreed to it if invoked. Betting worked on two fronts, first of which were the aforementioned star chips. You got 6 chips in total, 3 bronze, 2 silver, and 1 gold. You could also bet cards themselves, which before you drew your opening hand, you would mill whatever amount of bet cards and ante those. Said cards could not be used in the same match, and should you lose cards from a 40-card deck, then you could add from the side. Keep in mind that before each game, you had to count your 10-card side to your opponent to show them your side was legal, sans adding after ante. Other notable rules include the mention of the Exodia win condition, even though the card did not exist in any facet yet. Another interesting thing is that magic cards are mentioned to be destroyed after use, aside from cards that power up monsters and another card type I'll cover later. Wild trap cards must include self-destruction card text. Remember, card icons have yet to exist. Speaking of equipped magic cards, they are stacked on top of the monster and still count towards your 5 back row limit. There's a few more elements in regards to some specifics, so I'll cover those in a little bit. Going back to the Toei Animation Fair, if you played the OCG, you had to pick this box up as only 5,000 copies were sold. Furthermore, it included 5 unique monsters that would be swapped out for a public release. And they were solid cards, like the 13th Grave and Dark King of the Abyss with 1200 attack each, and Turtle Tiger with 1500 defense. Trial of Nightmare had an outstanding 1300 attack, which dominated the previously strong low-level monsters, not counting Kanan. But the best monster from the theatrical release had to be Aqua Mador. The second word in its name could possibly be a rewording of Mado, which means magic. Given this is a spellcaster monster, this makes sense. Perhaps Water Wizard is a more suitable name. Anyways, this card was strong upon release due to its outstanding 2000 defense. No low-level monster could attack over it, and if you had Book of Secret Arts equipped, then it blocked Gaia too. And with a 1200 attack stat, it could hold its own against contemporary beaters as well. Keep in mind that, like Kanan, the rarity of Mador meant it wasn't a widespread meta-warping card. When the starter box received its public release on March 18, 1999, the replaced cards weren't too notable, with cards like King Fog being okay in regards to Booster 1, and Rock Ogre Grotto No. 2 having solid defense. However, if you pre-ordered the box, then you got a nice bonus in Celtic Guardian, a monster with comparable stats to Kanan. If you had a lot of money, then you would definitely want to pre-order 3 boxes for this. Although, again, like Kanan and Mador, the rarity of the Elf Swordsman made it not so common to see, especially at 3 copies. With 50 new cards, a highlight was surprisingly the defensive cards. Ancient Tree of Enlightenment and Green Phantom King had 1500 and 1600 defense respectively. Monsters like this and the previously stated Turtle Tiger were hard to beat over unless you use a high level monster, and their low attack made them magnets for fissure, which could be a positive or negative depending on the game state. Quite honestly, a majority of the cards were weak, but that only made the cream rise to the top quicker. Monster-wise, this peaked with Blue Eyes White Dragon. Yeah, the legendary Dragon of Destruction, who was on the cover of Volume 1, finally makes their paper debut as the, still to this day, strongest attack for a normal monster, sitting at a whopping 3,000 attack. Dark Magician may be the ultimate wizard, however, Blue Eyes was the king in terms of attack and defense. A 3k attack could destroy any existing monster aside from an incredibly buffed up DM or Gaia. And 2500 defense meant DM couldn't punch over it either. Shysta. Expect this card to define the meta moving forward. The starter box also included some rather interesting back row cards. Polymerization was a first here that introduced fusion monsters and the fusion deck. With no limit in the deck, you may think bringing out a powerful 1800 attack Flame Swordsman would be great. Unfortunately, this was not the case, as according to the rulebook, in order to fuse, you must have both materials on field. This meant it took at least 2 turns to fuse, and an 1800 attack stat with weak materials otherwise would not be worth it in the face of Gaia or Medor. Also, some of the purple cards like Fusionist and Dark Fire Dragon didn't even include all their materials in the box, so if you play prior, you might have the cards from Volume 1. I suppose this was a way to get duels to pick up products ASAP to incentivize possible future releases. Needless to say, fusions were DOA due to their slowness and lack of firepower. Another new element was field magic cards. These are unique as they activate in the field zone and it does count towards your 5 back row limit. Weird. They gave a field-wide boost, which could be beneficial at times, or even disadvantageous if your opponent gains the edge. It's not like the monsters received a major buff, and tribal decks weren't great. So if you did want to play the strategy, you may have to compromise by running weaker monsters. And if your opponent played one while yours is on field, then yours got overridden and destroyed. The starter box field cards would technically have a different name, as you may tell. It needed a separation from its green brethren to note the necessary field zone. As such, it was called a field magic card instead of the other 2 magic types simply referred to as magic cards. In terms of magic cards, the only notable new inclusion is not one to bypass: Raigeki. This Thunderbolt is a simple, one-sided dark hole that says it all in one sentence. Quote, destroy all of the opponent's monsters, unquote. Using Raigeki to deal with a dragon or using it to direct attack with your own was nothing to scoff at. It's not the length of the effect that matters, it's how you use it. In regards to traps, there was slim pickings. 2-pronged attack was uncomfortable, since it was the only trap removal and additional removal otherwise for people who weren't able to obtain the power cards in Volume 1. Work with what you have, I suppose. Then there's Dragon Capture Jar, which, while continuous traps technically did not exist, the card just didn't have self-destruction card text. It was a soft removal for Dragon that didn't deal with the problem at hand, yet it could cause a stalemate. The only out was the only back row removal in Remove Trap. Since Jar was in essence an animal trap, Remove Trap's art being a broken snare has to be a cheeky reference. Yes, in regards to utility, this was the original White Hole. Starter box format definitely shifted the meta. A bougie build can consist of a lot of strong beaters, but a defensive build can also work wonders while still using the popular equip strategy. Cards like Celtic Guardian, Aquamador, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Raigeki were definitely staples in a modern sense. I suppose a Yami or Sogen build was possible if you want to play a rogue, more tribal strategy. Even if you pre-ordered 3 boxes and just used that, the bones of the meta were still there with beaters and defenders alike. Really, the box was geared towards explosive cards and defensive monsters being a primary focus. It was Konami's first real attempt to get people into the physical game, much like how Starter Deck Yugi and Kaiba were, and I can attest to that. After all, a rulebook is significantly more valuable than rule cards from Booster 1, and all things considered, the starter box was a must-buy at the time. But can Konami keep the hype train going past this spring? The answer may just surprise you.